You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll take an in-depth look at the new guidelines set by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, which puts forth a much stricter stance on drug use ranging from HGH to sleeping pills to cocaine and has caused major reverberations throughout combat sports. John and I will also discuss Brandon Halsey's vacating Bellator's middleweight world title last Thursday after failing to make weight for his main event fight versus Kendall Grove. And we'll examine the impact of Ronda Rousey's cover story in Sports Illustrated on her career, the UFC, and the sport of mixed martial arts overall. Plus, as we do on every episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions, so ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Last Friday, the powerful and highly influential Nevada State Athletic Commission issued new guidelines that overhaul punishments given out to their licensed athletes who test positive for drugs in 4 defined categories: steroids, stimulants, diuretics, and sedatives. This announcement has been described as everything from a way to clean up MMA and boxing to a classic example of governmental overreach to the end of big-time fights being held in the state of Nevada. Now, regardless of where all of you and our global listening audience come down on this with your opinions, one thing is without question, John, this is an impactful move by the... One more time. Now, regardless of where all of you and our global listening audience come down on this with your opinions, one thing is without question, John, this is an impactful move by the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
This is a huge move, Sean. I mean, this is groundbreaking. This is changing. It's changing the playing field because they've gotten to the point where they're tired. I think they're tired of giving out penalties that people are not, they're not being influenced by, because that's what the whole thing is. You're trying to influence fighters to look at something and say it's not worth it, and it's not working. It's amazing how people look at things, but we have got to do things to clean up both MMA and boxing because they both have problems when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs. When we're talking about those performance-enhancing, we're talking about EPOs, we're talking about steroids, we're talking about stimulants. All of these things can have an effect on a fight that's unfair. And, we need to have things as fair as possible throughout combative sports. And I think what Nevada is trying to show and what they're trying to do is tell these fighters, all right, obviously, the $2,500 fine and the 6 months or 9 months off is not enough for you to say, oh, it's not worth it. In fact, it's so little that you're saying it is absolutely worth it for me to cheat because in the end, the punishment is not that high. So we're going to end up raising these levels and we're going to make it to where the punishment is going to hurt. In fact, it's going to affect your career. And that's what I think Nevada is trying to do, is not so much, they don't want to punish these people, but they want to put out something that is in effect that tells the fighter, I need to change what I'm doing. I can't take this chance anymore.
John, rarely do you see something issued where about half the room says, that's fantastic, and the other half of the room says, that's awful. And I think we're seeing that here. Maybe a lot of it is based on people's personal beliefs of what government should and shouldn't do, but this isn't talking about rights of ordinary citizens. You're a licensed athlete. So, for instance, let's talk about marijuana use. Now, you could have a medical marijuana card. You could come from a state where having a medical marijuana card, you can possess it, it's legal with that card to smoke marijuana. But the Nevada State Athletic Commission doesn't care because they're not treating you as a private citizen. They're treating you as a licensed athlete. I know a lot of people said, well, how can you get a lifetime ban for marijuana? Well, that's how, because you're a licensed athlete, so you're playing by different rules. If you don't want to play by those rules, Nevada would tell you, then don't become a licensed athlete in our state.
This is where people start to mix up what is right and wrong as far as, they're saying, well, if someone has a medical marijuana card, how is it that Nevada can tell them, no, you can't use it? Look at, fighting is not a right. It's a privilege. And if you want to be part of this sport, you have got to follow the guidelines set forth by the athletic commissions that you are going to be fighting in front of and for. And when we look at, a medical marijuana card, look, let's be honest, okay? People get medical marijuana cards for what? Oh, I have headaches. Oh, I have this, come on. There's guys just handing those out because it's a freebie for you to go to a place, get marijuana, and, ingest marijuana, be it through smoking, be it through eating, whatever it's going to be. And I don't care. That's fine. And, that's great if that's what you want to do. But if you're a fighter, you have rules. And it's no different than, there's police officers that work for departments. The department says you cannot ingest any type of cannabis. Well, they could go get a medical marijuana card. That doesn't matter. The job that they have decided to be part of, the job that they have taken, and who they work for has a standard that says, no, you cannot take this. And so I don't care if they get a medical marijuana card. If they take the medical marijuana card, they buy marijuana, they go and they ingest it, they can be fired from their job because they are breaking the rules that they have agreed to abide by. And that's just the way life is when it comes to fighting. Marijuana, although I don't find it, any different than, we'll say, alcohol, it's not allowed. Nevada is saying we do not want our combatants ingesting this before a fight. And you're going to have to follow that. And if you don't follow it, great, you're going to get penalized. And if you don't want to fight in Nevada, then don't worry about it. Don't fight in Nevada. But you've got to follow the rules. When you apply for that license, you're saying you're going to follow the rules that they set forth. So follow them. If you say, I can't, then don't apply for the license, don't get licensed in Nevada, and don't fight in Nevada.
So there are 4 categories put forth by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So steroids, that would include HGH, testosterone, androstenedione. Stimulants, that would include cocaine, amphetamines. Diuretics, essentially weight-cutting aids, and sedatives, and that includes marijuana, sleep aids, muscle relaxants. So we're talking about a wide variety of things. We're talking about prescription drugs. We're talking about over-the-counter supplements. We're talking about illegal narcotics. And then we're talking about performance-enhancing drugs, but all of them now have been put under one category, one general category, in the subset of 4 categories by the state of Nevada.
And look at, they're telling you what you can take, what you can't. Now, any fighter that is going to fight in a state fills out an application, they fill out a form, and they are allowed to put all of the medications that they are taking at that time. Now, you as a fighter, again, this comes down to, it's the same as the Olympic athletes. It comes down to you are responsible for what you put in your body. No one else can be responsible for it. If we put that responsibility off on somebody else, then you can have the ability to say, well, I didn't know. And whether you're knowing or not, you're responsible for everything that is put into your body. You are responsible to know what you are allowed to take and what you're not allowed to take. And it's as simple as, who else are you going to put I'm not saying blame, but who else are you going to put the responsibility to? You've got to put it on the fighter. Now, if the fighter doesn't want to accept that responsibility, well, then don't fight. But when they tell you, you can't take this, you can't take that, it's there for you. You either are a smart businessman, a smart businesswoman, and say, okay, this is what I'm allowed to do, this is what I'm not. And let's look at the thousands and thousands of athletes that are out there following these types of guidelines when it comes to the Olympics and amateur sport or other types of sports that are out there. There's how many athletes having to follow these types of guidelines, and they're all doing it. And you know what? Fighters can do it too. And all they have to do is quit cheating. That's what it is. You got a lot of people cheating when it comes to the performance enhancing, as far as the steroids, the EPOs, all those things. And then you have people that are cheating life, as far as they are taking things that they know they're illegal. It's an illegal narcotic. It's not allowed by this athletic commission. It's not allowed by the law, but I want to take it. Well, that's okay. You have that choice. But when the consequence hits you in the middle of the forehead that you just got suspended and they're going to take money from you, don't cry. You made the choice.
So the Nevada State Athletic Commission, as you well know, John, has said everything is going to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And they've stressed that these are guidelines, not mandatory policies. But saying that in these guidelines, a possible lifetime ban for an athlete for a third offense for the categories of steroids, stimulants, and diuretics.
Right, Sean, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Third time. So you get popped one time and they spank you, as far as they give you a fine and they give you a suspension. And then you are so smart that you say, you know what? I still want to do this. And so you do it again and they catch you again and they pop you harder. Now, if this is your job and this is your profession, are you going to do it a third time?
Yeah,
Sean,
of course. Because
are you going to do it a third time?
Absolutely not. And I wouldn't do it a second
time.
time.
Why are you not going to do it a third time?
Because I learned my lesson. This is serious business. You know, I think
about, if you do it a third time, what are you telling everyone?
That you're probably a cheat or an idiot or both.
There you go. That's as simple as it gets.
You know,
why are we always trying to take the responsibility away from the people that should be responsible?
And John, to your point, so that's a lifetime ban for the third offenses of those categories: steroids, stimulants, and diuretics. Possible lifetime ban for a fourth offense of sedatives. So 3 times you've been told, you've been suspended, you've been fined, and you're going to do it a 4th time. John, I know you very well. We're close friends. You would say you deserve a lifetime ban just for being stupid at that point.
There you go.
Right?
But, you know, what you're doing is you're saying you don't care about anybody or anything but yourself. All right? You want to be that person? Great, be that person. But you, in crying about it when it happens and, oh, this is not fair, don't give me that crap. It's fair. You're an idiot. You knew what was going to happen. You knew that if you got caught, this was going to be what was going to happening to you. You were going to get spanked with this type of penalty. And now you want to cry about it and say it's not fair. No, what's not fair is that the world has to put up with an idiot like you.
John, I believe it was in the last Winter Olympic cycle. I'm not a huge Olympics guy, but I just randomly read an article online about some Olympic athletes who were getting popped because they were taking Propecia, which is for hair loss. Apparently, the active ingredient in Propecia is a masking agent for a precursor, an anabolic steroid. Regardless, it's been banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency and by the International Olympic Committee. So a lot of athletes are saying, wow, I took Propecia. I had no idea. But now if you're doing that a second time, a third time, a fourth time, what does that tell you? Even if you're just doing it for hair loss. Yeah, you're not learning your lesson.
You're so concerned about your follicle activities. Come on. You know what? You're full of it. You're a bullshitter. You're a cheater. And all you're doing is trying to use something as an excuse. Look, I can see someone getting popped on that Propecia one time and saying, I didn't know. Okay. You know what? You got to serve out your suspension. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. This is what it is. Don't do it again. And they're not going to do it again. If they do it again, what are they telling you? They're telling you they're a cheat.
Absolutely. Or if you really value your head of hair that much, then don't be in the Olympics. Make a choice. Because again, this isn't the rights of a citizen of the United States or Canada or their
That's
country.
the whole thing right there.
Absolutely.
This is not like, oh, this is my right. No, you don't have a right. You earned the ability and the privilege by doing things the right way. It's crazy. Crazy.
John, what do you think of the language from the Nevada State Athletic Commission saying these are just guidelines, it's not mandatory, everything will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis? Is that just the lawyers telling them, hey, we need to soften this, or do you really believe that?
I think, there's always going to be something out there that can change. I'm the first person to sit there and say, look at, no one should be allowed to take any type of performance enhancing drug if you are a combat athlete, because look at what our athletes are doing is inflicting damage upon another human being. And when you are amplifying your ability to do that through the use of certain drugs, that almost gets into the point of you're starting to cross over almost into a point of being criminal, because you're doing something that can do harm to someone and you're trying to amplify it through a method that is not allowed. So I will always sit there and say, I don't want anyone to take it. Now, if you, again, and I've been asked this question, you have, somebody, we'll say a war veteran who ended up having, something happened to him overseas, and they were in Afghanistan and they had, we'll say an IED goes off. In some way, they lose their ability to produce testosterone based upon something that happened when they were a soldier. I'm going to tell you, all right, that person, if they become a fighter, and this is what has happened, and they have lost the ability because you know what, they got their balls blown off, we'll say, okay, and now they're wanting to fight, and they want to take testosterone to at least bring them to a normal level. That's going to be the one time I'm going to say, yeah, I agree, they should be allowed to. So there's never going to be that 100% that I can sit there and say, no, you can't have it. But what I think Nevada's trying to do with, that verbiage is there could always be something that could come up that makes it to where they go, all right, we want to change our ability to give a lesser penalty based upon the facts that we have been given in this case. And that's just smart, because there's always going to be something that can change something or make it to where you look at something and say, that's more reasonable. I understand that. And I think that's what they're trying to do.
I think a lot of people listening to our program are saying, all right, this is the state of Nevada. Just don't get a license in Nevada if you're worried about it. But historically, John, of course, so goes Nevada, so goes the rest of the ABC members across the U.S. and Canada. Nevada really sets the precedent that everyone else follows, including on suspensions, going back to boxing in the 70s and the 80s.
Well, Nevada is considered the Mecca of fighting. They do not do the most fights in North America, and it's not even close, but they get the biggest fights. And so it's understandable why they're considered the Mecca of fighting. They've had the biggest world championship fights, be it in boxing and MMA. That's the place because of, the playground that it is, the casinos, with the UFC and Zuffa being, housed there, as far as that's their state that they, do business out of. All of this is leading towards, Nevada is the commission that ends up having more influence over the sports than other commissions. Again, California does way, over double the amount of shows that Nevada does. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, those little shows don't count as much as that big grand super fight. You get although it was a stinker, you get a Pacquiao versus Mayweather fight. The amount of money and the amount of press and the amount of eyes that center on you and what you're doing there is huge. And so they do the biggest fights. They do have the biggest influence over other states. And it should be that the state that has the biggest fight has the most influence. And other states need to get in line and start making it to where this is across the board. We have got to get rid of performance-enhancing drugs in combative sports. Now, to say you're going to get rid of them completely, there's always the ability for someone to make that choice and do something. But when they do, they need to get spanked at the same level, whether they are in South Dakota, Nevada, California, Maryland, Florida. It doesn't matter. They know I can't do that anywhere.
And because
that's the way it needs to be.
And because this is Nevada, John, other states, from your state of California to my home state of Kansas, are going to look at this. You would think that virtually every ABC member, forget virtually, every ABC member is going to follow suit with Nevada. Now, not all states have the resources to do this level of testing when you break it down to these 4 subset categories, but you would think that if you're an ABC member, you're certainly going to honor these suspensions, and you're probably going to start to try to emulate these policies, these guidelines put in by the state of Nevada.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of, like you said, not every athletic commission is going to be able to do this type of testing, especially, when it comes to other promotions. The UFC goes and says, hey, we're going to help with the cost of this. And that's a huge factor. That's a big step with, getting this type of thing done, because the amount of money that goes out into testing is sometimes crippling to athletic commissions. I can tell you that in California, they have absolutely not doubled, not tripled, more than quadrupled the amount of money going out on testing, because it's the biggest issue and it's what they're trying to clean up. And that money just doesn't, just doesn't appear. It's a huge factor in any athletic commission doing business. You've got to make money to do business. So there are small commissions that are going to have a hard time in doing these types of tests. But everyone needs to start getting in line, and everyone needs to make it to where athletes understand, oh, I can't go here. Now, there's always going to be places outside of the ABC and North America that, you want to go to Asia, you want to go to, fight for, one championship. They don't do drug testing. Okay, go there. If you want to take the drugs, go there. But, the amount of eyes that are going to be on you are going to be a lot less. And, it's not pride anymore. There's, the fighting that's done over in Asia is not quite as big as it used to be. But there's places that you can go. Don't take that UFC contract. Don't take that Bellator contract and go overseas and fight, not in front of your family and friends, just fight in front of some people that are, there for the show, and be happy that you can take these drugs. But if you want to compete in North America, you're going to have to start competing in a smart way. You're going to have to start getting rid of some of the stuff that, some guys are doing, and start getting this back to an even level playing field.
John, you just hit on it. And as a final point to this subject, let's talk about loopholes, because there's always a way around things. Look at the case of the late Tommy Morrison. Tommy Morrison, when he tested positive for HIV, although he claimed, I think up until his death from full-blown AIDS, he didn't actually contract HIV. But as far as the state of Nevada was concerned, Tommy Morrison tested positive for HIV. They pulled his license. Morrison was able to fight professionally. He fought Marcus Rody in Japan, because Japan, they didn't care about the state of Nevada. They didn't care about the ABC. They didn't care about anything other than let's make this fight, because it's structured so differently. That's in the 90s. Even now, in this decade, you could circumvent it. Probably in Japan, you could certainly do a fight in the Caribbean, probably some Eastern European countries, probably some South American countries, probably some African countries.
Yeah, I mean, this is what people don't look at. They go and they sit there and say, oh, man, they should let them fight. Do you want to be the opponent? You have someone that has a disease that can cause your death. Do you want to be the opponent? Now, if we have someone that says, I'll be the opponent, they need to understand there's still liability there, because a lawyer will come after the athletic commission saying, oh, you knew, you should never have let this happen. And so the athletic commission is sitting there saying, we're not going to let anybody fight with that type of disease. And so those people go and they go across, the Pacific Ocean, they go across the world, and they can still get a fight there. Go ahead. But you're not going to do that here, where it is more about the health and safety of the fighters. That's what is number one here in North America. That's what Nevada is really trying to get after, is the health and safety of not only the opponent, but of also the person taking this stuff, because they're not looking into what is this going to do to your long-term health. And so this is about trying to do what's right.
But John, you could see a case though where somebody gets a lifetime ban. Let's say they've popped 3 times for HGH, a lifetime ban. If they're a big enough star, their agent's going to get phone calls to go fight overseas, and there's nothing Nevada or the ABC or anybody else can do about it, as long as there's a willing opponent.
No, there's nothing that, Nevada is going to be able to do about it there, and that's fine. But, these guys that are these big stars, let's take a look at Vanderlei Silva. Vanderlei is, he's a big star in our sport. He's done a lot in our sport. He's performed at the highest levels. And, I know his thing just got overturned as far as what the Nevada State Athletic Commission came out with was basically a lifetime suspension. A judge just overturned it. So, Vanderlei could end up fighting somewhere, within the States. He could get a license and he could end up getting a fight. But Zuffa is going to have to want to put him out there. And that's the question. Are they going to put him out there? Because they hold his contract. He's under contract to that company, and so he can only fight when they give him that fight. Now, they may release him, and he can go to Japan, and he can fight again, and he can take whatever he wants, or he can go to, Singapore or, Manila, wherever it's going to be. But Vanderlei fights for money. That's why Vanderlei fights. The days of, I fight because I love it, those are gone. Okay, those go away after a while. And look at, someone fights for money. So someone out there is going to have to say that they can have enough value in bringing Vanderlei to wherever they want to have him fight, that they can make enough money off of it that it's financially viable for him, because he's not going to fight for nothing. He's not fighting just because, it's so much fun. He's fighting to make money so he can pay his bills and he can live his life. So the amount that he wants is different than the average now. And that may be the difference in whether someone's going to bring him there or not.
Every week on this podcast, John and I answer your questions. Ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Outstanding questions coming into us every week. Please keep them rolling in. And of course, please include instructions on how to correctly pronounce your name. First up, Mike Whitmore, who included a pronunciation guide, John, for his last name. Well done, Mike. That puts you right to the front of the queue. So Mike asked, and I didn't need it for Mike, by the way, for all of you listening. Although, there you go, Whitmore. Although with me, sometimes I obsess. Is it Mike? Is it Mike? There you go. So Mike asked, I'm wondering about how the unified rules govern, quote, throwing in the towel. The Nevada Commission guidelines have it listed as a foul. Does that mean that corners aren't allowed to use this method to end the fight?
All right. We're going to go back in time for you, Mike, just to explain this. Back when we first did the unified rules back in 2001, the people that were in that room were a lot of promoters from different organizations. Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta from the UFC, Joe Silver from the UFC, Jeff Blatnick, myself. You had Larry Hazard was the one that actually brought everyone together from New Jersey. And Mark Ratner was not in the room, but he was on a conference call listening to everything. And the only thing in the end that Mark wanted was Rule 31, which was our last one, because it was the last thing and it was what he brought up, is I would like to see that corners are not allowed to throw the towel. In Nevada, they did not like the throwing of the towel. They wanted the inspector to come up and signal the referee to stop the fight. They thought that there can be confusion with a towel coming in. So that was put in as the 31st foul under the unified rules for mixed martial arts. Then in 2010, there was a review by the ABC, and they took and removed that as a foul and said, we're not going to say that this is a foul under the unified rules. If an independent commission, such as Nevada, decides that, we like it that way, then you can have that as part of your legislation and your rules for MMA, that no, you are not allowed to throw a towel to stop the fight. So if you go to Nevada, that is still the rule. You cannot throw the towel to stop the fight. But you can go to California, which follows the unified rules, and they will tell you, yes, you can. It's under the unified rules. There's nothing as a foul anymore. You can throw the towel. It just depends on what state you're in. Every state kind of changes, their little rule set, be it in boxing, be it in MMA. There's little variances and little differences.
John,
under the unified rules, you can throw the towel.
Where I am in Kansas, it's actually in the Kansas Athletic Commission rules as a disqualification. If you throw in the towel, or if you step up onto the apron or the outside of the cage, it's a DQ. Now, I've never seen it enforced, and it's really unfair because a fighter, be it boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA, they're basically in the position to get a TKO, and they would rather win by TKO than win by disqualification. But that's actually a rule. So when I've refereed boxing and kickboxing and Muay Thai in Kansas, we always say, if you want to stop the fight and you feel the referee isn't doing it, go to the Kansas inspector who is stationed in your corner, tell them, and they will alert the referee. Don't throw in the towel.
And so that's basically exactly what Nevada does. And that's the way that they want it done, and that's fine. and every state has the ability to make it the way that they want. It's under the unified rules for mixed martial arts. That is no longer a foul. That ended in 2010.
Next question is from our good friend in Canada, the excellent MMA referee Todd Anderson. So Todd asked, what are your thoughts on a fighters union? Would it work? And if so, would it have to be promotion specific or an independent organization that would represent all pro fighters that fall under the jurisdiction of the ABC? It's an interesting question.
No, Todd Anderson's a pain in the ass for asking that question. You know what? It's a good question in the fact of, does there need to be a fighter union? Well, I'm not the person to say that there needs to, but I think it could be beneficial for fighters. Anything that you look at that you say, someone that represents the fighter, someone that helps them get health insurance, dental insurance, those types of things, that's never a bad thing. That's a good thing, and that's what unions can do. There's promoters out there and promotions. The UFC actually gives their fighters health insurance. They're the only ones that do. Bellator, being out there with Viacom owning Bellator, they don't give, health benefits to their fighters, and it would be great to see them do it. And a union could actually, possibly help in getting all fighters something like health benefits, which is desperately needed. But to say that a promotion is going to be that union, no, that's not going to work. You have to have independence from the promotions, because promotions are always going to be working towards, what's going to be best for them, what's going to be best for the financial bottom line. The one thing that I will hand the UFC that they do all the time, a lot of people complain about the Zuffa and, they make too much money. You know what? They make a lot of money. I'm not going to say that. But they also do things that they don't have to do that help the fighters. And they can never make everybody happy. You're not going to make everyone happy. You got the Reebok deal, and there's people complaining about it and all bitching and stuff. And it's like, you can't make everybody happy. Anybody that thinks that they're always going to make everyone happy is just a fool. You're going to have people that are upset. And all you can do is what you think is right for the majority. And if you have, dissension and complainers and by a couple, well, then that's just the way it is. Don't be happy with me. But the union would be someone that, is out there. I can say again, Scott Coker from Bellator had set up his strike force model off of, well, if a union ever came in, they were set up in showing that what they were doing as far as payout for fighters compared to money coming in showed that the majority of the money that was spent by Strikeforce actually went to fighter pay. And you look and you say, that's what a union's going to want. And so he had kind of set up that base model. So even with Bellator, he's going to be able to come back and I think easily, if a union came in, easily work with the union and be happy with, showing them, hey, look this is what we're making and this is what we're putting out. And the union's going to, be happy with that. The UFC, is a private company. It's not a public company like Viacom. So they don't have to have, they don't have to give their figures. They don't have to give, what they're making out. They're a private company. They're not public. And so they're not going to be happy with any type of union because they don't want to start to have to work and give out numbers and have that as a public, knowledge compared to the way they have it now. So it would end up having to be an independent, organization that was in charge of that fighters union. They would have to be able to work with all the promoters and promotions out there, and that's not going to be easy. But is it possible? It's always possible. What unions do is they help people that are working for a promotion, a person or place that doesn't give everything that they can. And, sometimes you look and say, there's times when unions are needed. There's times when unions aren't. I'm not going to say that unions are good or bad. They're both. They're necessary because if there wasn't unions, then there'd be a lot of people that were being taken advantage of. Sometimes you can look at fighters and say some of these fighters, are they being taken advantage of? They don't get some of the basic things that people need to help survive in this world and to make it. So whether there's a union or not, I don't know, but it's been talked about a lot, and talk usually ends up making things happen, even though sometimes those things take a long time to come about.
Remember, keep your excellent questions coming via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, Big John and I will examine how Brandon Halsey lost his Bellator middleweight world title at weigh-ins, but still won his main event fight over Kendall Grove the next night. And we'll discuss what impact Ronda Rousey's appearance on the cover of Sports Illustrated will have for the UFC, mixed martial arts, and for Rousey herself. With John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. It's the book that Wrestling Observer calls a must-read for any MMA fan. Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report describes as riveting and amazing, and TheFightNerd.com says nothing is held back. Pick this book up right away. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, written by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by John McCarthy, is now available to listeners of this podcast at the special price of $12.48. That's far less than you'll pay for the book on Amazon and half price of what you'll pay in store at Barnes & Noble. Buy it directly from the publisher now online at ascendbooks.com and enter the promo code LEGAL50. That's ASCEND books.com, promo code LEGAL50. Learn the true story of how the UFC came into existence in the book that Randy Couture describes as honest, shocking, and enthralling, and that has a rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars from Amazon Reader Reviews. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by Big John McCarthy. Available now online at ascendbooks.com for just $12.48 when you use the promo code LEGAL50.
For all of our listeners looking for great new designs in MMA apparel, look to the new clothing styles of Lambs to Lions. That's right, Lambs to Lions has got new styles with old and new put together. Boxing, MMA, everything. Go to lambstolionsbrand.com and check out their line of clothing.
Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on!
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Last Friday at Bellator 137 in Southern California, a card which, John, you refereed and I commentated for Spike, Brandon Halsey defeated Kendall Grove by 4th-round TKO to remain undefeated in his pro MMA career. Halsey, however, did not remain Bellator's middleweight world champion as he was forced to vacate the title the day before weigh-ins for coming in 3.1 pounds heavy. So in a very unique situation, Grove would have been given the title belt had he won, but instead, even with the dominant victory by Halsey, the Bellator middleweight world title remains vacant, John.
You know what? And this is a situation where I agree with what Bellator did. You know, and I talked with Brandon Halsey. He's a good guy, and he made a mistake. Fighters, I always say, have 3 things that they're responsible for. And, those 3 things are important. You need to be on time. If you're supposed to be somewhere, be on time, because there's people they're working behind the scenes. They're doing everything to try to, make things happen for marketing and for publicity and promotion. And if you're not there, it doesn't matter how hard they worked, you're ruining everything with it. So be on time. The second one is, you know what? Make weight. That's your job. Your job is to say that I can make this weight. When you sign the contract, you're saying I can be at that weight. And so it is your job to make weight. The third thing is you're supposed to come in that night and fight as hard as you can. Do your best. I'm not saying you're going to win, but come in and fight to the best of your ability. I'm even saying, it's not even a fighter's responsibility to train. They don't have to train. Now, that's going to help them win. It's going to help them possibly, have that element that's going to put them over the top on this opponent that they have, but they don't have to. But they do have to be on time. They do have to make weight, and they do have to give their best. That's the three things that, are required of the fighter. And with Brandon, he missed two of them. He definitely got the third one. He was late by 2 hours. Okay, that's inexcusable. There are a lot of people waiting on him, and it's inexcusable for him to be that late. He missed weight by 3.1 pounds. There's a whole lot of people saying, well, why didn't they allow him to make that weight? That is based upon, there's things within the unified rule that say a fighter cannot lose more than 2 pounds in an hour's time. Okay, so if you're over that 2 pounds, it doesn't matter if you lose 2 more pounds because you're still over the limit for that title fight. That was 3.1 pounds. So they're not going to let him lose it. And the third thing is we have doctors that look at the fighter. Brandon came in, he's dehydrated. He's trying to lose that weight. He just didn't make it. And so the doctor looks at him and says, I am not going to allow you to try to lose more weight. You're already vastly dehydrated. I think it's bad for your health. And so he doesn't even allow him to try to lose that weight. So people are sitting there complaining about it. No, don't complain about it. Okay, you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to be on that weight at this time. Be there at that time. Make that weight. Now, the one thing that Brandon did do is he came in and he fought hard, and he put on a great performance. But Brandon is a young fighter. This is a learning experience. Again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There are things that you must do. And when you don't do them, there's consequences. And Bellator is basically, they're using Brandon as that centerpiece to show everyone. They're telling all of their fighters, hey, we're not going to put up with this. We need you to be professional. We need you to come in and be on time. We need you to make your weight. And if you don't, we will take steps as much as taking a title that you have earned in that cage and taking it away from you. And you know what? I agree with what Bellator did. It was the right call. It's sending out a notice to everyone. Hey, be professional. You say you're a professional fighter, then start acting professional. Start doing all the things that are required of a professional fighter.
Bellator's Director of Regulatory Affairs, Corey Schaefer, a good friend of both of ours, John, he took time and explained to me late on to Thursday night the situation. And essentially they were working with Andy Foster, who heads the California State Athletic Commission. They wanted to create the fairest situation possible. And the consensus was Kendall Grove trained for a 5-round world title fight. He did everything right, including making weight, being there.
Yes, he did.
So the idea was if Grove wins, then he's the champion. But Halsey cannot take the belt. And Bellator was very clear in saying Halsey wasn't being stripped of the title. He didn't vacate it after the fight. He vacated when he weighed in at 188.1.
That's it. And this has happened before. You had Travis Lutter, who earned the right to fight Anderson Silva through the Ultimate Fighter. They had the Ultimate Fighter, I want to say it was season 4, where they had the return of certain people. And that was when Matt Serra got the ability to fight George St. Pierre and won the title off of that. Well, Travis Lutter did the same thing. He earned the right by beating Patrick Cote in the finals, and he earns the right to fight Anderson Silva. And he comes in and he doesn't make weight. He weighed 189 pounds, I think is what it was. And they said, well, we're going to let you fight, but you can't win the title. And he doesn't deserve the right to win the title because he didn't do what is required of him to earn that right. He did everything that he was supposed to do by fighting earlier, by getting the wins that he was supposed to, by earning that right through the Ultimate Fighter. But part of his responsibility was to make weight the day before the fight. And if you don't make weight, then you don't deserve the right to have that title. Now that, when you look at Anderson, yeah, Anderson's fighting, he's the champion. But if he loses that fight, he doesn't lose his title. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And the same as Kendall Grove. Kendall did everything that was required of him. All these things that I'm talking about, those 3 things, Kendall was on time for weigh-ins. Kendall made weight, and Kendall went out and fought to the best of his ability. He did everything that is asked of a professional fighter. So when you're looking at it, you don't want to take away Kendall's ability to win that title because he did everything that he was supposed to do. Give him the right and the ability to fight for that title. And if he doesn't win it, then the title is vacant and you can bring in other people. And, Brandon Halsey's going to absolutely be back and he's going to fight for that title and maybe he'll get that title back. But I guarantee that he's learned something off of this entire situation. And by losing that title, it stings. That's something, when you win it, it takes a lot to win it. That's a lot of time, effort, energy. Everything that goes into winning that title is huge. And just to have it taken from you hurts. It sucks and you feel cheated. He wasn't cheated. He made a mistake, learn from the mistake, and move on.
In November 2008 in the WEC, Paulo Filho, I know you remember this, John. He was the WEC's middleweight champion. He weighed in heavy for his title bout versus Chael Sonnen. So Filho was forced to vacate the championship, and the fight still occurred on schedule, but it was switched to a non-title bout. Sonnen won by unanimous decision, but he didn't get the belt. Filho said, "I'm going to mail you the belt." He never did. Then the following month, the WEC completely disbanded their middleweight division, but it's a very similar situation. And
Chael got cheated.
He did, because you see why Bellator made the decision. If Grove wins, it's his belt. Because what did Chael Sonnen do wrong versus Filho in November 2008? He did everything, including winning the fight.
That's it. Chael did exactly what was required of him. He made weight. He ends up fighting. He beats, Paulo in that second fight, and he got nothing for it. And he should have, he should have had the ability to win that title. That title means a lot. Guys, that's what guys are working for. Those belts mean a lot. I mean, even in amateur, I did a silly, it wasn't silly, I can't say that. There was a private fight here in California where there was people paying, $10,000 for a table, to be part of this charity thing, and they had fights going on for it. And they had, amateur MMA, guys that had quite a bit of experience in amateur MMA, but they're coming in to fight, and they had these belts for them. And man, you should have seen those guys wanting those belts. I'm bringing that home belt to show my mom. And that's not like a world title or anything. That's just a belt. It really is just, you're the champion of this charity event. Great, but that belt means a lot, especially when it becomes that belt from Bellator, the UFC, or the old WEC. It meant something. Everyone wants to be able to have that picture of them putting that belt on them. They want to be able to have that belt for the rest of their life to say, at one time I was the champion. That means a lot. There's a lot that goes into that, and it means a lot. So, the whole thing, is how it was handled. I actually think that Bellator handled it in a very professional and in a completely fair way with what occurred.
John, my last thought on this, you listed the three things, which I completely subscribe to. But for me, throughout my experience as the commentator for Pride and M1 and Affliction and now 6 years with Bellator, the one thing that you have to do above all else, you have to make weight. Because I've seen guys, especially in Bellator, who were winning fights but got cut from the organization, had their contracts pulled because repeatedly they failed to make weight. MMA is not boxing. We'll forgive losses. We won't forgive you repeatedly. We talked about earlier with the drug testing. You're doing it second, third, fourth time. If you're doing the same thing, missing weight repeatedly, you're probably going to find yourself either for a new promotion or finding a new line of work.
Yeah. Unfortunately, for fighters, and I mean this, there's weight categories. It's not like the NFL where it really doesn't matter what you weigh. NHL, you can play if you're a 175-pound player. You can play if you're a 250-pound player. Baseball doesn't matter as far as how much you weigh. Football doesn't matter. Basketball doesn't matter. All of them. But in fighting, we do have weight classes. And that's why we have athletes that are smaller, people that can't compete in the NBA. They can't compete in the NFL because of the size that they are, but they can compete in a combative sport, be it boxing or MMA. But part of that responsibility, if you want to be in that, is you have to make weight. And making weight is huge because, again, what it does to the promoter The promotion is putting all kinds of things out now, especially if it's a bigger fight. There's a lot of marketing and a lot of publicity, and that's all money going out on you being there for this championship fight. And as soon as you don't do that one thing by not making weight, they can have it to where this is not a championship fight anymore. And all of that promotion, all that marketing, all of those dollars spent were wasted because you didn't hold up your end.
Well, we are in an era where magazines are quickly losing their relevance and importance, but it's still, without question, a very big deal to be featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Now, for those of you listening to our program outside the U.S. and Canada and who would like a bit of context, Sports Illustrated is an incredibly influential weekly magazine which has been in existence since 1954 and which still holds incredible status and prestige. So it's absolutely huge that Ronda Rousey has been featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated, joining Roger Huerta as the only MMA fighter to receive this honor. And to me, John, this now means that Ronda Rousey has become one of those rare athletes who transcends their sport, like Serena Williams, like David Beckham, like Peyton Manning. They become an outright pop culture celebrity.
I think, yeah, Ronda has gotten to that point, you know, with everything that she's taking part of, the movie roles she's getting, just everything. She is that absolute. She's crossed over to where she has people that don't follow MMA following Ronda. And you know what? God bless her for doing it. That is, my hat's off to her. Part of it is, you know, the way the UFC has promoted it. Part of it is the way that she has, you know, handled herself. And part of it is the way that she fights. And the part that cracks me up is, you know, there's people that are complaining about the cover and what it says, that she's the most dominant athlete.
We're getting to that in a moment.
It's hysterical that people are complaining about it. It's, you know, the whole thing is just ridiculous to me. But you know what? She deserves everything she gets, because when she has been put on that line, when the hot seat is on her, when the pressure is there, she has responded every time and responded beautifully. So Ronda deserves everything she's getting.
So, John, you give us a beautiful segue. So Ronda Rousey, Sports Illustrated cover. She's proclaimed the world's most dominant athlete, which brings us to this week's poll question. Remember that you can cast your vote on our website. Let's get it on podcast.com. So here we go. Do you agree with Sports Illustrated that Ronda Rousey is indeed, quote, the world's most dominant athlete? Vote yes or no at Let's Get It On Podcast.com. John, for me, the metric is, how do you compare to your closest rivals? Now, whether that's being in an individual sport, or if you're in a team sport, that would be people in your league, or if it's an international sport like soccer, around the world, but at your position. So if it's in soccer, how does Lionel Messi compare? I don't know if I've lost you on soccer, John, but how does Lionel Messi compare to other great goal scorers around the world? It would be that type of thing. So how does
here's my question for you? Let's take Messi. Let's take Ronaldo. Let's take
look at you. All right, look at you, man.
Any of them. You know, I don't care who it is. Let's take them in soccer. Let's take LeBron James in basketball. Let's see, who else do we want to take in basketball? Let's take Curry, since that guy can score from anywhere right now. And in football, I'm going to take J.J. Watt, because he's just a freaking animal, and I love the guy. Or let's take one of the fancier ones, and we'll take DeMarco Murray. Had a great year last year, so we got those. And then in baseball, who are we going to take? You know, let's take, you know, a guy that crushes the ball fielder, or then we'll take, let's say, Yasiel Puig. All right. Which one of those in any of those sports dominates their sport the way that Ronda dominates hers? Not one.
There's not one. And if you looked at
those guys all lose games.
Right. Well,
those guys all go to. Yeah, well, hold on. You know, let's take a look at it. If I go to soccer, Messi has games he doesn't score a goal.
Yep.
Okay. Same with Ronaldo. I can go to basketball. LeBron James has games where, you know what, he just doesn't play that well. Okay, his team can still win. His team could lose. But when you're looking at when it says most dominant, okay, that's the whole thing. It's not saying she's the best athlete. It's saying she's the most dominant. And right now, with women's MMA is very young. All right. There's just not, you know, the years behind it. And so when you're saying let's look at how dominant she is. Let's see. She's had how many fights now? 11?
11.
11 pro fights. And how many of those has she won? Oh, 11. All right, let's break that down. Let's see. She's had 11 pro fights, and how many of those pro fights have gone the distance? Oh,
0.
None of them. All right, that means she's ended every one of them. Let's see. She's had 11 pro fights, and 10 of them, 10, have gone not farther than the first round. That's pretty freaking dominant. In fact, her last 2 fights have totaled less than half a minute.
John, I added this up. Her last 3 fights have gone a combined 1 minute, 36 seconds.
Okay.
Insane.
So, I mean, they're not putting weak people against her. Let's see. They put Sarah McMahon, and this is an Olympic silver medalist. That's a good athlete. All right. Alexis Davis is a great jiu-jitsu competitor. She's a good fighter, man. You know, she's got talent. She's tough. She just got destroyed. Kat Zingano was undefeated. And she comes in there, and in 14 seconds, and it's actually less than that, just ask Jean LaBelle, she's out of the fight. I don't know how much more dominant you can say someone can be. You know, we can look at the greatest MMA fighters there are. We can look at the greatest boxers there were, and no one comes close to what she has done so far. No one. Mike Tyson at one point was putting people out in his younger days, in the beginning of his career when he was fighting every month. He was knocking guys out in the first round, second round, third round, and just walking through them. But these are tomato cans, okay? This was all to get Mike experience. When he was champion, and let's just say that Ronda's been champion now, she won the championship of Strikeforce, I'd say in basically her 3rd or 4th professional fight. And then she's been the UFC champion ever since that. She has had all these championship fights where she's done the same thing that she was doing when it wasn't a championship fight. She's destroying her opposition, and that is good opposition. You know, people cannot like Miesha Tate. Miesha Tate is a hell of a fighter. She's a good person, and she can fight. You know, it's just she has not performed, you know, to the way that she thinks she can perform against Ronda. Now, is that because of Miesha or is it because of Ronda? Let's, you know, take a look at the people that Ronda Rousey has competed against. They're the best people that the UFC can put in front of her. The best that there is. And she's destroying them. She is absolutely the most dominant athlete in sports right now.
Well, John, we talked about athletes from team sports. If you look at athletes from individual sports, Novak Djokovic, all right? So he's probably going to win the French Open coming up, but Nadal might win it, Wawrinka might win it, Federer might win it, Murray might win it. It wouldn't be a huge shock if he didn't win the French Open. Same with Serena Williams on the women's side. Rory McIlroy, I think he's surpassed Tiger Woods. He's the best golfer on the planet. He's not going to win every tournament. He's not even going to win half of the tournaments he enters. Maybe the closest I can think right now is Gennady Golovkin, possibly, because there's no male equivalent right now to Ronda Rousey. Igor Vovchanchyn had that great run. Fedor Emelianenko had that great run. The earliest days of the sport with Royce Gracie, but there's no one, I don't know, maybe John Jones, but he's out of the picture. But even then, I don't know. Golovkin, for me, is probably the closest to Ronda Rousey across all of sports in terms of domination.
You know, and you look at Gennady, and he's just. I look at Gennady, and he reminds me so much, especially, you know, with the weight class he's fighting. He's a middleweight. He is the Marvin Hagler of our time. And the reason I say that is he is in a position where people don't want to fight him. He's actually carrying guys in fights that are good fighters to try to, you know, show people, oh, look at, you know, yeah, this guy went this far, you know. And that's exactly what happened to Marvin Hagler. Marvin Hagler, no one wanted to fight. There was only a couple of guys, you know, Vito Anaformo fought him, you know, a couple of times. And you had a couple of guys there, but it took that star fighter. It took Roberto Duran to put Marvin Hagler over the top when Marvin beat Roberto. And as good as Gennady is, he's not doing what Ronda has done. He's absolutely, you know, putting people down, but you look at, you know, he fought Martin Murray. you look at the Murray fight, he destroyed Murray, but Murray lasted into the 11th round of a 12-round fight. Okay, that's, Gennady's got, let's say 33, 34 fights now and probably 30 knockouts. And he is absolutely dominant in the middleweights, but he has not dominated his competition to the level that Ronda has dominated hers. That's what separates her, And Gennady, right now, I'm telling you, is not fighting the best competition there is for him. Let's be honest. If we want to see Gennady Golovkin fighting the best competition, we're going to take Canelo Alvarez and put him against him. We're going to take Cotto, who won the middleweight title from Martinez. He holds the other end of it. I'm going to make Cotto fight Gennady. I don't think Miguel Cotto right now wants to fight Gennady, but these are the kind of guys, or he needs to move up and fight the Andre Ward. These are the kind of guys that are going to put Gennady in that category, but he's got to get rid of them in a way that matches what Ronda's doing, and he's not going to do that. I'm just telling you straight out. He's a great boxer. I think he's phenomenal. But what she has done with the best competition there is out there for her is she has destroyed it. She has absolutely just trucked everybody in such dominant fashion. Miesha Tate is the only person that's gotten out of the first round with her. That's it.
And that was in the rematch.
And that's in the rematch. And there's some people saying that Ronda wanted that fight to go long because she wanted to punish her. I'm not saying that's true, but there's that out there. I always look and say, that's all talk. But she's the most dominant athlete there is in her sport. No doubt about it.
And of course, the anti-Rousey people, which there are plenty, including in our global listening audience, would say, what about Chris Cyborg? She's dominant, but she's dominant at 145. She just doesn't have that cover girl appeal. She doesn't have the marketing and the PR push behind her.
Well, the big thing that I will tell you about Chris is she absolutely is dominant. She's fantastic at what she does. But right now, there's just no true competition at the 145 for her. There's no one out there that can be that person that you say, this person is, at a level to beat Chris. Look at when Kat Zingano was going to fight Ronda Rousey. There was plenty of people saying Kat Zingano can beat Ronda Rousey. This is what she needs to do to beat Ronda Rousey. She has the ability. She has the skill level. There was a lot of people saying that Kat could beat Ronda. There's no one that is going against Chris right now that anyone says can beat Chris. There's just not that level of competition. And that's why, as I look at things, when it says the most dominant athlete of her sport at this time, she has dominated in a way that no one can match up. And it's based largely on she's fought the best competition she can be put against, and she has destroyed it. Chris is phenomenal. She is a great fighter. She is tough. She comes forward. But Chris, if you look at, MMA, she's been destroying everyone ever since her first fight. But then she stepped into another field. She stepped into Muay Thai, and, she lost that fight. She got handled easily by a good Muay Thai fighter and lost her lion fight that she had in Vegas. So right there, it takes her out of the equation, because it's not quite MMA, but you're the one that wanted to step in that ring. You wanted to do that Muay Thai fight, and then that person handled you, so I got to take you out of the equation. Ronda's the one.
John, the bigger picture is that even in the U.S., MMA is still an underdog sport. It's still largely ignored by the quote-unquote mainstream media. So this is huge. Roger Huerta was the first MMA fighter on the cover of Sports Illustrated. That was May 2007. The difference, though, is that Huerta wasn't the focus of the cover story. The UFC was the focus. In this situation, Ronda gets the cover, and she gets the cover story profile in Sports Illustrated. It does great things for MMA. It does great things for the UFC. And I follow the logic. So the UFC goes, so Bellator goes, and every other promotion down to the smallest mom and pop AMI show in the smallest National Guard armory in the smallest city that you can find. I think this is great. I think even the anti-Ronda Rousey people would probably begrudgingly have to admit that this is a big step forward for mixed martial arts moving into the mainstream. I
think it's a huge step for women's MMA. That's the one that I think it really is going to, when people look at that cover and stuff, they see Ronda, they see, she's going to have UFC on her sports bra or shorts or something like that. She's got them on the gloves, and people associate her with the UFC, and it's good. It's a good thing for the UFC, but it's huge for Ronda, and I think it's huge for women's MMA, which is, it's building, and it's getting bigger, and it's getting better, and there's more girls, going out to MMA gyms and learning how to fight and competing now. And to have someone like, Ronda, because before it was, the face of women's MMA was Gina Carano, and Elite XC was pushing Gina and got her on, CBS, and she was absolutely the one that, held the torch for the women out there. But she couldn't fight the way that Ronda fights. I'm just being honest about it. She was, she's a pretty girl. She's a great person. She's a good fighter. She just couldn't dominate people in the fashion that Ronda has been dominating people. And, she went out and, fought Cyborg and lost in the first, right at the end of the first round of that fight, and hasn't fought since. But if you're looking for someone to be the face of your sport, I don't know how you can get any better than Ronda Rousey and what she's doing for women's MMA. The fact that she's on the cover of Sports Illustrated, it speaks volumes about her and what she has accomplished and the way people now perceive her and all of these accomplishments that she has, just kept on getting over and over and over. And what she's done is now resonating with average people. There are little girls out there wanting to be Ronda Rousey. That's awesome. And, a lot of them want to be Ronda Rousey just because they think, she's in movies, because she's pretty. And there's ones that say, I want to be able to fight like Ronda Rousey. That's awesome. That means Ronda Rousey is doing good things for the sport of MMA.
John, final point on this. In the 90s, Christy Martin was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, the real big surge, the first surge for professional women's boxing. A lot of people said it's a fad. Christy Martin was inflated. She's kind of fallen into obscurity now, and she's had some bad things go on in her life, which no reason to detail. No real reason to detail here. We're not that type of show. It's easily searchable on the internet. But people said, and maybe it was proven true, pro women's boxing really was a fad. I think Rousey, not just the Sports Illustrated cover, but just everything that she's done, her presence now in sports culture and pop culture, I think it puts to bed the idea that women's MMA is a fad. I think it's as legitimate to MMA as women's tennis is to men's tennis, or women's golf is to men's golf.
Absolutely, because it mimics it so well. And that was the real problem with women's boxing. I think I've said it before, is women's boxing became this element where people would, in the end, figure out that, well, this is a 10-round fight, it's going to go 10 rounds. Well, this is a 12-round fight, it's going to go 12 rounds. Because women didn't have, for the most part, anybody that could punch with power enough to knock another girl out with one punch. They could do it sometimes when they got multiples in there, and there was always the exception. I always point out to Ann Wolfe, who is, the ex-trainer of James Kirkland. She hit with power. Chris Cyborg hits with power in MMA. But most girls, they're of lighter body weight. The muscular structure of their body and how much they weigh, they just can't generate enough torque and force to create that knockout with one punch. But in MMA, they don't have to just punch. They can punch, they can kick, they can knee, they can elbow, and all of those have different varying force factors as far as how much torque is created through all of them. And then in the end, they also have that thing that Ronda has, for the most part, taken all of her opponents out with. They have submissions. So it's almost a complete 180 degrees, especially when it comes to Ronda, is people were complaining about women's boxing because it was, it's going to go the distance. And so they're going to have to sit and wait through this because they know there's not going to be a knockout. And that kind of takes away a lot of people's want to actually view that fight. Where in Ronda's case, everyone's going, well, it's not going to go the distance. She's just going to armbar people. And, that can almost work against you. But it's not going to be that way with all of women. And all of the women that are out there fighting in MMA have the ability to end fights the same way that men do. And they're doing it. And that's why women's MMA has gained traction. That's why it is where it's at, because the girls are mimicking exactly what the guys do. And the outcome of, is this going to go the distance or is this going to end up with a submission and knockout? No one knows. And that's what we need for women's MMA.
Big John and I are back with you next week for an all-new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website. You can download, you can subscribe, you can do anything you want, including answering our Ronda Rousey poll question. Let's Get It On podcast.com. Of course, you can also find us on social media, facebook.com/Let's Get It On Podcast, and on Twitter @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @John McCarthy MMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that is info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Every week, we're adding more listeners and more subscribers around the world. This is your podcast as much as it is ours, so please help us keep spreading the word. For John McCarthy, our producer Chris Lakin, and our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the Eight Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.